Hi, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you. We turned 60 this year, so it's our birthday. I'm going to talk about AI, unsurprisingly, but I'm going to talk about AI in the context of it being everywhere. And I'm going to talk to you about what happens when the magic starts to disperse. Because magic, she's impish. She doesn't stick around for very long. What happens next? And history has taught us two things that we've seen many times over the years at Wolff Olins. We've seen the magic disperse, and we've seen what happens when things start to become commoditized. So they start as magic, and then they end in commodity. And at first, things feel like they're miraculous, whether it's electricity, the internet, mobile phones. These things feel amazing. And then before long, they feel ordinary. And then before long, they feel invisible. And then before long, you only think about electricity when you can't find a charging point. This is what happens when the magic disperses. So here's the cycle that we've seen many times before. So there's a rush, and then eventually there's a collapse. And when there's the rush initially, everyone is building on top as furiously and as fast as they can. And the problem with this is that everyone starts to build on the same infrastructure, and they start to build the same thing. And that doesn't go unnoticed. Before long, everything just looks the same. So you can trace this pattern through time. You know, we start with the magic. Mass adoption becomes a utility. We're in a sea of sameness. And then what happens? Well, then you're in a fork in the road, and then you have to make choices. Economists call this convergence. At Wolff Olins, we just call it déjà vu. So for anyone who wants to go back in time, welcome to the dotcom boom. I was certainly around for it. So mid-90s, dotcom boom takes off. And in this era, anyone can build an empire. It's exciting times, and everyone did. So money poured in, investment, and between 1998 and 2000, in just 2 years, 40,000 dotcoms are launched, which partly explains why you could never get a dial-up speed that was anything worth waiting around for. And of course, the bubble had to burst. The NASDAQ fell by something like 85% or 80%. And then the collapse happened, and 95% of those businesses disappeared. And it wasn't because the tech failed, tech got stronger. It's because the ideas failed. They didn't deserve to be in the world, and you couldn't choose them. Everything was just undifferentiated. Sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? So here we are with AI. In the last 5 years, 70,000 AI startups have been created. I'm sure more are being created at this event today. And they're all built largely on the same stack. and they're all building largely versions of the same thing. So the question really isn't if AI will become a commodity. The more interesting question for us at Wolff Olins is who will survive when that happens? And what are we going to build that's going to help survival? So let's take a look back through time for some learnings and some lessons, and some smart things that businesses have done that have made them successful into the future. So if you look at Amazon, they didn't sell products. What they were selling was convenience. That's what they're known for, and that's a bigger idea. Netflix didn't just stream movies. They sold the idea of stories coming into your home. And Google didn't just list the internet. They made information accessible for all of us. Bigger ideas than the tech, more interesting ideas than other people were selling. And so they decided to rebel against what was there already. It's turned out quite well for them, helped people choose them. So now we're in the next cycle, the next revolution, the next turn of the wheel. And we don't see any point in chasing that wheel. Where we see the value is in building brands that are going to survive that turn and thrive afterwards. And having lived through every cycle, we feel like we've got something to say about that in terms of how to answer that question. And when that magic does disperse and everything does feel the same, we think it's time to get a little rebellious. And I'm going to dip into the archives, because we are turning 60 this year. And I'm going to talk about 3 acts of rebellion with clients that we've worked with. And the first one is Orange, the mobile telephony company. And by way of background, Orange started life with a license that made them 4th to the market. So not the 1st, 2nd, or even the 3rd, but the 4th. They had no special advantage. Tech wasn't different. They had nothing to differentiate them from anyone else who was in the marketplace. And they came to us and they said, how do we help people choose us in this environment? And we said, it's pretty simple from our point of view. You need to find a different story. And at that time, mobile phones, for anyone who wasn't around, apart from being the size of a brick, they were very status-led. So they were owned by bankers in the city, and they were owned by estate agents. They were for them. They didn't seem to be for us. And so we used that to our advantage. We thought about that and what that meant, and we thought about why mobile phones could be useful to all of us. And as a result of that, we didn't build on tech. We didn't build on product features. We didn't build on plans that gave you extra minutes. We built on this idea of feeling. We built on the real-life experiences that we have. The fact that at that time, my mum wanted to know I was going to get home on time, and I could call her and she'd do that, and that made her feel safe. And we built a brand that was not built on functionality, it was built on feeling, and it was built on optimism, and it was built on how it could take you into the future. So we built and we declared that this brand was for all of us, and the future was bright, and the future was orange, and we would build it together. And it was entirely built on feeling. Scroll forward in 2000, Orange was sold for 25 billion. It was double the value of its nearest competitor in the time that it was built. So Orange proved something very powerful, I think, which is when everyone is selling function, feeling can become a real advantage. The second act of rebellion I want to share with you is a bank that you may never have heard of, but served a very critical purpose in the UK back in the 80s. So at that time, if you were walking down a high street and you wanted to use a bank in the UK, you would literally have to be walking down a high street to find one. We thought they were unhelpful. The opening times were really inconvenient. They were never open when you needed them, or could get away from work to use them if you were working. And they weren't very helpful. We thought of them this way, and we didn't think of them this way for no reason. They were all of those things. So when Midland Bank came to us and said, we have a new proposition, that we'd like to launch. We said, look, the world doesn't need another bank in the way that we have banks at the moment. Don't do that. Midland Bank is now owned by HSBC, by the way. So we said, let's build a different kind of a bank collectively. This is not going to be solved with a fresh lick of paint. This needs something entirely different. And so we were asked this simple question, well, what do people actually want from a bank? And the answer was pretty simple, if a bit radical from our point of view. And it was, if you want me to switch, don't make something that's just slightly better. That's not going to work. You have to make something that is spectacularly better. That's what's going to make me switch. And so we did. We didn't just rebrand. We looked at how you could rewire the entire system. And we built a bank that didn't serve itself, it served people. It would be open 24 hours. It wouldn't have bank charges. And then there would be real live people, real helpful human beings at the end of the phone to talk to you. It would be a telephone banking. And we developed a name and an entire system based around that idea. So it was called First Direct because it put you first, and it was the first to do it, and it was direct. It was simple. It made everything simple, including how it looked. It's just in black and white. It's straightforward. And it broke every convention that there was at the time. And 82% of its customers recommended them to a friend. I know that because one of my friends recommended it. So this was a bank that really did feel like it understood what you needed and could serve that purpose. And it was systemic. It was not cosmetic. And so they won not by how they looked, not by just putting another bank in the world. They won by changing how a bank actually worked. And then I'm going to bring you to my third and final act of rebellion as an example, which is around asking the question that no one else is asking. So when everything is the same and everyone seems to be agreeing about the direction, there's always a moment to get curious and ask, could there be something else? Decathlon, a much-loved retailer, growing globally and scaling, came to us. And they talked about their growth plans and where they wanted to go. And they started to question where they were in the world and who they were for. And they asked us, what next? And what else? And so we built a new positioning with them to move beyond simply being a retailer. And they do a lot of sports equipment, as you probably know. But we also thought, well, that doesn't feel big enough. We should get beyond just being a simple sports brand. Because when you think about sports, it can be quite narrow. You just think about personal bests and podiums and medals and winning, and the story is all about grit and determination, and it's quite individualistic. And we thought there was room in the marketplace for Decathlon to become a gateway to adventure in sports, not be that kind of a sports company. And we saw an opportunity to think about how we all love sports from such a young age and the joy and the wonder it brings when you participate. And we thought there was a real opportunity there to be able to go back to that sense of wonder and that sense of play, and to make that an invitation to the world, and to make that the platform, and that felt like something much bigger that you could scale beyond simply being a retailer and simply being a sports brand. And so we built a brand that was all about joy and all about wonder. So, 3 acts of rebellion: turning function into feeling, rewiring the system, asking the question that no one else is asking. As we go through all of the changes, as magic does her thing and starts to exit the stage and leaves us with a lot of stuff which people can't decide between, the question for all of us is going to be, who's going to survive and why should they? And some of these stories give you a sense of who will and why they will. And so my invitation to you, if you're one of the people who's shaping these brands or creating these brands, is I'd encourage you to become rebellious, be rebels. Don't just create something because you can do, because it's possible to. Create something that has a really real meaning, because that's really worth building. Thank you very much.